North Korea conducted its second ballistic missile test in less than a week, firing over 700 kilometers just days before the U.S.-South Korea kick off the annual Ochi Freedom Shield exercises on August 17th. From an intelligence perspective, does this test show that North Korea's missile forces are actually ready for real combat?
I would say three things to that. First of all, no. These launches alone do not, represent a completely developed system. I'm not saying the system's not developed or fielded or tested or integrated with a doctrine and trained upon, but these launches alone are designed to give that impression. That is what Pyongyang hopes they will do. And unfortunately, sometimes I think voices in the media give too much credit to Pyongyang for its accomplishments. This doesn't mean we don't take the threat seriously. I'm just saying that it takes a lot more than one or two launches into the East Sea to represent a fully deployed, capable missile.
Pyongyang's foreign ministry issued a sharp warning of unparalleled countermeasures in response to South Korea's long-term nuclear-powered submarine and technological capabilities. As someone who evaluates indications and warnings, how to analyze separate routine propaganda rhetoric from actual indicators of a new capability deployments or retaliatory force posture shifts?
Well, we know that deterrence is in the eye of the beholder, and the degree to which messaging propaganda threatening South Korea, claiming advances in technology, seeking to signal a willingness to exponentially improve their nuclear forces. All of this is designed by Pyongyang to give the impression of an increasing, growing threat. We listen to these threats. We watch the developments. We watch, for example, missile launches, launches of vehicles, and how the ships, etc., and how they perform. We take note of the strategic messaging, although I would say that there's nothing inherently new in the idea that North Korea is going to develop some type of capability to counter this upcoming ROK nuclear submarine. But as far as tactical warning and specificity, this type of messaging is of really little value in terms of trying to determine exactly what Pyongyang is talking about and when they plan to deploy it.
As North Korea continues supplying munitions and troops to Russia, intelligence monitoring has focused heavily on what Pyongyang receives in return. What specific technical indicators, whether in submarine warfare technology, re-entry vehicle telemetry, or drone tactics, is the intelligence community watching most closely right now?
Well, I should repeat, first of all, that I don't represent now the U.S. intelligence community. I can imagine how they're looking at this threat. They're looking at areas in both the WMD nuclear missile realm as well as conventional realm, where there would be shortfalls or vulnerabilities that North Korea perceived in areas that Russia may be able to help them. It's certainly the Russia DPRK relationship has captured the attention. That's why we have foreign policy analysts looking at this, economics analysts, military analysts as well. Adam Farrar and his colleagues over at Bloomberg released a piece not too long ago that talked at roughly 20 billion plus, I think 22 billion was the number that Adam put out there, of benefits to North Korea from this relationship with Russia since it began in 2022. I don't know if the numbers are alike, but what we can see is across the board, more resources, more technology, and diplomatic support and confidence for Pyongyang that it can survive without sitting at the table and seriously discussing denuclearization. And these are just some of the problems and some of the concerns that we have and that we're focused on when we look at what North Korea gets out of this relationship with Russia.
Over the past couple of years, Kim Jong-un fundamentally redefined relations by codifying South Korea as the primary enemy and dismantling inter-Korean mechanisms. From an intelligence standpoint, could this represent a temporary pressure tactic or a permanent strategic pivot?
Well, it's an interesting messaging shift, but as somebody who has sat in negotiations, the six-party talks with both South Koreans and North Koreans in the room, watching how North Korea portrays South Korea internally to its people, its messaging on ROK president after president, how illegitimate they are, how hostile Seoul's policy is, how much of a puppet the United States is. I find absolutely nothing new in this shift toward portraying South Korea as a primary enemy and dismantling inter Korea mechanisms. There's a certain choreographed messaging effect that sends a hard message to the outside world and the domestic audience that fundamentally North Korea sees no value in improved relationships with the Republic of Korea. We know this is a snapshot in time. That could change under the right conditions. But again, I do not see the language as, in and of itself, portraying a sudden shift toward a worsening of inter-Korean relations. Those relations were already bad for decades.
North Korea continues to emphasize battlefield and tactical nuclear delivery options. What is the single biggest operational capability in Pyongyang's evolving missile arsenal that Allied intelligence and defense planners might be underestimating?
I don't think that underestimating is a good term to describe how we look at the North Korea threat. There's been periods in the past where there's been debates, for example, on the uranium enrichment program and its progress during the 2000s while we were negotiating with six-party talks, and there was uncertainty as to how much North Korea had advanced, what the size of its arsenal would become, et cetera. I think in all these areas, particularly across the U.S. ROK alliance, there's a shared understanding of the threat that we face. I would say that looking at the lessons of ongoing conflicts, Iran, U.S., for example, the need for sufficient ballistic missile defense, a good stockpile of missile interceptors, and abilities to deal with these newly emerging drone capabilities, both offensively, how do we leverage the technology to achieve effects that complement, missiles and other tools we have, as well as a capability to defend against these types of drone attacks, particularly in large numbers. So these are areas, again, I don't think we're underestimating. I just think these are areas where there will need to be greater emphasis. North Korea is watching the conflicts, U.S.-Iran, the drainage of missile defense, intercept capabilities in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's watching and it's weighing what the implications are. And these are areas on which we simply will have to focus going forward.
In recent months, we've seen complex signals between Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang. Is Beijing truly concerned about the growing Russia DPRK military alliance, or does it view this partnership as a useful counterweight to U.S. influence in the region?
I think China instinctively gets nervous when it feels it doesn't have absolute uh, insight into and input or control over strategic dynamics such as this, particularly in Northeast Asia, its backyard, where it's got a direct impact from Beijing's perspective on its national security interests. Beijing is thinking of a number of things here: its relationship with countries in the region, the possibility of some type of action to pursue reunification with Taiwan, and the less unknown variables they have or variables that are beyond their control, the better. So it looks at time like China is seriously concerned. I know that's a rather, common sense conclusion that sudden improvement of relations between DPRK and Russia risk undermining any leverage China may have with North Korea. But I also do believe that there's a degree of confidence that there are good outcomes from this, as you note, a useful counterweight to U.S. influence. The Russia and DPRK cooperation is diverting some attention away from China, so it's a good thing for China. For all in all, I think uh, we've seen recent developments. CSIS did a piece on this, on what seems like a rebound in the relationship that had been somewhat weakened since, frankly, Hanoi, the winding down of denuclearization dialogue, the pandemic, and the impact of the pandemic on ground level trade figures all the way up to high level diplomacy. There does seem to be a certain recovery of the relationship. So I don't think there's any perceived crisis on Beijing's part concerning how it sees the development of Russia DPRK relations. But it certainly does want to have a say in the scope and direction some of this cooperation might have.
And finally, there is an ongoing debate in Washington between maintaining immediate, complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization as a negotiation prerequisite versus pursuing a cold peace focused on risk reduction. From your unique position, having served both as a diplomat and senior intelligence official, is there a viable middle ground that reduces immediate collision risks without legitimizing North Korea as a permanent nuclear state?
I do believe actually this has been our policy going back many years. I've said it before and I'll say it again. CVID as a goal, complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, and the pursuit thereof has not been an obstacle to us sitting down with the North Koreans and talking about their nuclear program and talking about other issues, improving bilateral relations, economic and energy assistance, working towards stabilizing and normalizing the relationship with Japan, improving inter-Korea relations. All of these topics, all of these options, all of these incentives for North Korea to come to the table and talk about ways that we begin to halt a program, and then after halting it, disable it, having disabled it, dismantled it, and after dismantling it, abandoning it in a process. CVID was never an event. It was always designed to be a process in which it would start with a halt. North Korea would get some type of reward for those actions, and then we would move on in a step-by-step process. So it's an interesting messaging campaign to demonstrate a willingness to sit down with North Korea in spite of its nuclear capability. But frankly, we've been sitting down with North Korea in spite of what we know about their nuclear capability, going back really to the six-party talks in particular. And so I don't think this will bring the magic solution to the current uh, standoff in talks. I do believe that thinking about a cold peace with a protracted period of an openness to dialogue, potentially unreciprocated, unanswered by North Korea, a willingness to engage, while at the same time, a commitment to ensure that deterrence maintains peace on the peninsula is not unlikely to be the most viable path going forward. We're going to have to keep doors open and we're going to keep muscles flexing if we're going to maintain deterrence and have a credible way to somehow get back to negotiations that can seek to either slow, reduce, halt, or reverse the growth of North Korea's nuclear program.